And our very first speaker, and always a special spot in my heart for the first speaker up. It's like the first one to go over the top in a battle. But hopefully nobody gets gunned down. We just get applause. Valerie Lofaso is our first speaker today and is a local talent with deep roots in the community. Having grown up just down the road in Derry and now residing in the Seacoast area. Valerie is a multi-talented professional serving as an empathic medium, paranormal investigator, Reiki master, and the author of the Tangled Web of Friends series and The Vital Empath. Valerie is also the co-founder of the KRI Center for Consciousness Studies in Stratham, which, though is closed in 2019, remains in treatment to her enduring testament to her enduring dedication to spiritual exploration. She continues her work with the Seacoast Paranormal Research Group, staying active in the field of paranormal investigation. When she's not immersed in her writing or other paranormal pursuits, Valerie dedicates her time to supporting fellow empaths through one-on-one mentorship and by hosting her monthly empath support group gatherings. Empowerment gatherings, and now celebrating their 10th year, 1 year more than we have here at the festival. In addition to her professional expertise, Valerie is an experiencer with a lifetime of UFO and ET encounters that began in childhood. Today, she's here to share with us her earliest and most profound experience. Please join me in giving a big welcome to Valerie Lofaso.
Thanks. Oh, all right. Good morning, everybody. Can you all hear me okay? All right. Well, I appreciate the acknowledgement for being first speaker. I do like to be up here first and get it over with, and then I can enjoy the rest of the weekend, which, you know, not a bad thing when you're energetically sensitive. But I want to thank you all for showing up first thing in the morning as well. Like, you guys deserve a round of applause for yourselves for being here at 9 a.m. because it's a Saturday, it's a holiday weekend. You know, sleeping in sounds really good, doesn't it? But you're here, and I'm so grateful for that. So my lecture today is called Empathy, Aliens, and Quantum Physics, a continued quest for understanding. But before I start talking about that, I want to talk about this man. You're probably going to hear his name several times over the course of this weekend. And if you've attended the festival prior to last year, you know who he is. If you don't know who he is, his name is Paul Eno. And he was a fixture of this event for many years with his son, Ben, and they always brought their radio show with them, Behind the Paranormal with Paul and Ben Eno. If you haven't heard his name before today, write it down and look him up when you get home. Listen to the archives of his radio show, read his books. You will thank me later. I first saw Paul speak at a library about 12 years ago, and I was immediately blown away by him. He and his son talked of very complex subjects in ways that a non-scientific mind like myself could actually understand. Not long after I first saw him, he came in and spoke at the KRI Center, which was a second home for me for the 9 years that it was open. And it was, you know, the first of what would be many, sorry, technical difficulties. One of the hazards of being the first speaker. So over the course of 9 years that the KRI Center was open, Paul spoke with us many times over those years. Our friend Mike Stevens, who is also a speaker here this weekend and was part of the KRI Center, would do a saucer symposium to help raise money for this event. Paul and Ben would come, they would bring their radio show. We would see them at other events over the years. They were just a fixture in our lives at that point. And I wouldn't be standing on this stage for the third year in a row on my own if it was not for him and his encouragement of my telling my story. To use a term that he used often, he unfortunately translated on April 4th of this year, and our community, the paranormal and the UFO community, lost a great man. I was lucky enough to get the opportunity to work with him before he passed, and it is now part of my mission to carry on his legacy, because he has left a legacy behind, not just of his paranormal research, but of his kindness and his integrity in how he approached all life. Paul was a role model for me as an investigator, a researcher, a writer, and as a human being. I hope you will attend our tribute to him tomorrow at 10 a.m., but for now, I hope to share a little of my mission and his legacy with you this morning. So I'm going to start with my story. If you've been here the past couple of years for my lecture, you've heard my story in bits and pieces. And it all starts with this one moment that this image kind of captures for me. For a very long time, I only remembered this one piece. I remembered I was about 4 years old. I was with my dad driving down Route 28 in Derry, New Hampshire, so not too far away, heading towards the Wyndham border. It was dark. We were in his blue Pinto, little hatchback car, and we were just coming home from running a quick errand. As we were approaching a hill, a very familiar hill on a very familiar road, we see a green glow coming from the other side of the hill. I was just curious. I was 4. I didn't know any better, but I could feel my dad's instant fear and caution. And he told me to get on the floor of the car behind his seat. And because he's my dad and I was 4 years old, I did as he asked. I could tell, being sensitive, I could tell he was afraid. So I hid behind his seat and I felt him reach behind the seat. You know, he put his hand back there to feel that I was there and that I was safe. And that was all I remembered for a very long time. That incident would hover in my mind for more than 2 decades. And I would think about it once in a while and say, maybe it's just a dream. I don't know, it's weird. But typically dreams fade at some point, you forget them. And this never faded. I never forgot it. Then one day, around 2005 or 6, I was watching a ghost hunting TV show. They were just becoming very popular at that time. And they used the term empath. There was a medium on the show who was talking about empaths. And I'd never heard that term before, but he started describing it. And I perked up. I said, ooh, that resonates with me. And for those who maybe don't know the term empath, an empath is a person who is highly attuned to the feelings, emotions, and energy around them. They are often considered outsiders, introverted. They are observing and absorbing everything going on around them, taking everything in and processing it, which means we are often seen as standoffish, shy, or aloof. So when I heard this term and just felt so deeply that it explained so much of my life, I started researching it. At that time, I was also a single mom with a very small child, and I was searching for a place to belong. I had always had a fascination with the paranormal, and I was working on writing my first book, and I needed some hands-on experience. I was writing ghost stories, and I had a publisher tell me my stories needed more bite. And I said, well, how do you get more bite? You actually go out and do what you're writing about. And so that was when I found the Seacoast Paranormal Research Group, which still exists today. And that was around the year 2009. But it took about a year for me to kind of get integrated into the group for multiple reasons. And about a year later, in 2010, I started training with that group. And the core group had 3 members and myself, one of which was a medium. In May of 2011, the 4 of us opened up the KRI Center for Consciousness Studies that was in Stratham. And Mike Stevens, who I referred to earlier, he was part of this group, and he started an event called Social Saucers. I think there's several faces here who have been to the Social Saucers meetings. I started going to those purely to support Mike. You know, I had a loose interest in ufology and loved to hear other people's stories. So I went to support Mike, to listen, to support the other attendees. But then that memory kind of started, you know, tickling my brain and saying, you know, pay attention to me. And I realized I'm not advancing my slides, I'm sorry. So that's my image of what it feels like to be an empath. It's a lot of fun. Blessing and a curse, as we say. So this memory was tickling at the edge of my mind. And then things started to come up. We call them signs. The first one happened when I was driving home one night from the KRI Center. I live in Portsmouth. The center was in the Stratham area. So I was coming up Route 33, heading home. And as it happens in the Seacoast, it was a foggy night, and I'm coming around a corner, going up a bit of a hill, and I see up ahead a green glow. And I know it's just the traffic lights. I know this road. I drive it all the time. However, it brought back a feeling of familiarity to me. It also brought with it a sense of anxiety, almost a feeling of something missing or something out of place. And in that moment, I realized there had been other times in my life where I had seen a similar green glow from the traffic lights or whatever, and it had given me that same feeling, and I had just brushed it off because I just didn't know why I was feeling that. So that was one of the first signs that came up for me. The next one came up at a Social Saucers event. There was an attendee who was talking about the Michelin Man type ET encounters. I'm sure most of you have heard of this type of ET before. And that again sparked a memory. And I don't know why at the time I didn't know why I associated it with my experience, but I felt like it had something to do with my encounter. And so I listened to the person talking about it, and I said, yeah, but there's something with that green glow. And it gave me the feeling of, you know, a Scooby-Doo-like monster. That is an actual Scooby-Doo monster. And they were always like radioactive and glowing green, right? You know, so it's real easy to then go, you know, but maybe I'm imagining this. Maybe it was all those episodes of Scooby-Doo just infiltrated my brain, right? It's so easy to doubt ourselves. But then signs keep coming up. This was probably one of the coolest signs. This is me and my dad. I was, you know, probably about 2 years old in this picture. So my dad passed away in 1997, before I heard the term empath, before I started, you know, doing any of this paranormal stuff. And as I started working with the KRI Center, I was working with the medium, and I was learning how to use my own intuition and gaining confidence in that. Gaining confidence in it meant connecting with my father, who I was very, very close to in life and missed dearly. So I worked to form a spiritual relationship with my father. And when I felt like there was a good amount of confidence for me, I trusted what I was getting for information, I decided to go into a meditation and ask him about this memory, this maybe dream that I had. And he had a really interesting response. So I wanna first explain, so I believe that I have a soul connection with my father. You know, people believe in soulmates, but there's also a thing called soul groups, and those are people that you meet in lifetime after lifetime in various forms. It doesn't have to be a romantic partner. It is often relatives, parents, children, that sort of thing. I believe I have that kind of connection with my dad. So in death, he is still around me. And he is still kind of acting like my dad sometimes. And when I approached him about this incident, he refused to talk to me about it. He went, nope, not talking about that. And I thought that was interesting because as my dad, if he wasn't being protective of something, he would have said, you're imagining things. That was Scooby-Doo. That was a dream. He wouldn't have shut up. And he shut up. It was interesting, and it was very, very telling. So then another social saucers event, our good friend and local historian, journalist, and ufologist Dean Merchant, who also co-founded the Exeter UFO Festival with his wife in 2009. He was a regular attendee of the social saucers events, and he came up one night and brought with him a map of what he believed was a hotspot of UFO activity. I shouldn't have been surprised when he turned that map around and said, this is Route 28 in Derry, New Hampshire, heading towards the Wyndham border. And I went, all right, okay. So it wasn't just me. A couple years ago, in researching more about this, I actually learned about some other sightings, and looks like you guys can probably see that pretty good. So the bottom right of the triangle, that is where my experience, roughly where my experience happened along Route 28 in 1980. If you go up to the other yellow pin, it says unknown in 2014, that's the Robert Frost Farm, which many of you have probably been there. So there's two incidents that I know. Ironically, when I was researching all of this, I decided to ask my mom, who I'm not very close with, but I had approached her and said, did Dad ever talk about a UFO encounter? And she said, no, but I think I saw one once. And I'm like, Mom, like, you know I do this stuff. Why haven't you told me this before? I hadn't thought of it before. Okay, and I said, well, tell me about it. And she said, when I was little, so in the late 70s, early 80s, she was working at the Mall of New Hampshire in Manchester. And she was driving home from working one night, and over the Robert Frost Farm, over the trees, she saw a glowing light. And she said it didn't look like an airplane, and it was acting a little weird, but she wasn't sure what it was. So technically UFO, right? Unidentified flying object. There was also an incident that you can find if you just go to an internet search in 2014. There was a man who, I believe he was a realtor, and he was playing with his new drone and learning how to fly it, and he captured what he thinks might be a UFO on that drone camera. And he did have a member of MUFON look at it and evaluate it, and they weren't able to explain this object. So the video is out there online. It's pretty interesting. So that's, that's maybe 2 miles from where I had my encounter. If you go to the top of the triangle up there, that was a 1973 incident in Rainbow Lake that is still up Route 28. And that was several witnesses saw two glowing objects crash into Rainbow Lake. They described them, I believe, as orange or red and being about the size of a basketball. There were a lot of witnesses. The people who lived around the lake, people driving saw it as well. Calls were made to the police and fire. Officials went out, they searched the lake, and nobody could find anything to explain that. Of course, they officially tried to chalk it up to, swamp gas, which I love, but I don't know. If anybody knows a lot about swamp gas, I would love for them to come tell me whether or not swamp gas can actually crash into a lake. Usually it's like rising up out of something, but I don't know. Like I said, I'm not a scientist, so I don't know. So that's about 3 miles up from the Robert Frost Farm. And then the bottom corner of the triangle here, closer to me, That was an anonymous report that was given to me. A woman who lived in a house on a good amount of land, kind of a farm. She was an empty nester. She was having trouble sleeping one night, going room to room, trying to find somewhere that she could, lay down and get a good night's sleep. And then some light outside caught her attention, and she looked out the window, and there was a UFO in her backyard. She described it as kind of an inverted V. She saw beings inside of it. And it was a very interesting experience because this woman was a born-again Christian, and she said to me, I'm not supposed to believe in these things. My faith tells me I'm not supposed to, but I know what I saw. That's pretty telling. And then inside of the triangle, if you can see that star, that's another very interesting incident. From December 15th, 1956, a man named Alfred Horn was out in the woods looking for a Christmas tree to cut down when he felt like he was being watched. He turned and saw a little critter about 3 feet tall, a greenish gray, with big ears and big eyes, and they just stared at each other for a while. And then he said, nobody's gonna believe me when I tell them this story. So he tried to capture it. And so he leaped for it. It screamed and ran away. Kind of don't blame it, I would do that too. And one of the investigators of that incident was one of the investigators of the Betty and Barney Hill incident as well. And that is known as the Derry Ferry incident. And I grew up in Derry, and I only learned about this incident 3 years ago. Don't know why. There should be a plaque or something for these things. So also not far away from where I had my incident, in the very bottom corner, you might be able to see a little circle, and it says America's Stonehenge. That's another anomalous place, and it's all so close. That's 10 miles from where I grew up. For those of you who don't know, America's Stonehenge is located in Salem, New Hampshire, and according to their website, it is described as a maze of man-made chambers, walls, and ceremonial meeting places at over 4,000 years old, though no one is certain who built it. It's a site that has captured imagination, and many parallels have been drawn between America's Stonehenge and England's Stonehenge. It has been featured on many radio and TV shows, including Ancient Aliens, and was even referenced in an episode of The X-Files, which was pretty cool. So all of this kept coming up for me, and I couldn't ignore the signs. I needed to know more. I needed to know, was this a dream, or did something actually happen? So in January 2019, I finally decided it was time to do a hypnotic regression. And I was able to learn what was causing that green glow, what was on the other side of that hill. And so I'm going to read a little bit from the transcript I created from the recording of my hypnosis. On the other side of the hill, we are forced to come to a stop. My dad and I see a lot of lights, headlights and flashers of 2 police cars, along with the green glow emitting from a craft. It is a low dome shape, 3 points, silverish gray. The dome protects the part underneath that is producing the green glow, like a shell. It has legs or landing gear to raise it up off the ground a little bit. I can tell my dad's fear has lessened, or maybe his curiosity just finally wins. We want to go inside of it. It's like we're being called to it. As we get closer, I can see the police officers yelling at us, but I can't hear them, almost like there's a buffer, and they won't come closer to us. My dad looks at me and says, "Are you ready for this, kid? We've been waiting for this for a long time." I don't know how we get inside, but it's as if it absorbs us. I'm looking around, trying to figure out what I'm seeing, because it is nothing like anything I've ever seen before. So I don't know if any of you have ever done hypnosis, hypnotic regression, but I was literally laying there for several minutes because when you have no context of what you're looking at, you don't know what you're seeing. And so it took quite a bit of time before I could finally put it into words. I did a lot of trying to feel with my senses as an empath, to sense what I'm sensing, if that makes sense. Whatever we're inside of, it's a living entity, but not in the same way we are alive. It's more ethereal, more space between the parts that make it up. And it has consciousness. Each piece has a consciousness. It is pieces, but it is a whole. The feeling I get from the consciousness is friendship, a lot of genuine kindness. They want to help us, but they are not forcing us to do anything. I look at my dad because I can tell that he isn't feeling quite what I'm feeling. He's not as trusting as I am because he's older, he's got the fatherly instincts going on, and many more years of that human stuff getting in the way. As I move through the hypnosis session, I start to see a bit more. It reminds me of when you see pictures from a scope inside of like a human heart. There are organic chambers, and there's some light illuminating it. You can see something like veins, but not like what we have. I describe it as pure energy, but then I say, whatever that is, that's not the right term, but I don't know how to describe it. Again, how do you put into words something you have no idea? You've never seen anything like this before. But it has form and it has structure, but not solid in the way that we are solid. And I'm not just seeing this. I am experiencing it with all 6 of my senses, integrating the information at once. The beings are the pieces, and they have multiple voices, but they are all talking at the same time, saying the same thing, the pieces of this organic craft. I watch my child self get closer to what looks like a wall and lean backwards, but I fall into it. And next thing I know, it's like I'm crowd surfing. The pieces have lifted me up and are carrying me around, and I'm having fun. I tell my dad to have fun and enjoy it. He is trying, but he struggles with it. So they yank his mustache and they pull off his glasses. They remind me of a swarm of birds or fish that are individuals but can work together to create forms and are able to make pieces into fingers to tug at a mustache. I watch as my dad becomes overwhelmed, drops to his knees, and starts to cry because he's finally let go of his fear and he can feel the connection. Then it's time for us to leave. Somehow we are back in the car, and I can see the green light rising up into the sky. I don't see the police cars anymore, and I'm not sure where they went or when they left. My dad and I drive the rest of the way home in silence because my dad doesn't want to talk about it. That human fear is coming back. I'm not going to talk about it because he doesn't want to talk about it, but I feel happy. As we're driving, I can feel my younger self starting to forget what happened. I'm still happy, but I'm forgetting why. However, my younger self doesn't care because I'm just feeling the feelings. While still in the hypnotic regression, I get taken back to the craft briefly, and I ask for my present self if there's anything I can be doing differently. They say that I have figured it out and I need to keep doing what I'm doing. They gave my past self a book, though it wasn't a real physical book. It was an energetic book that faded once I left. But over the years, I found what I needed, just like finding the pages of the book. I still feel really happy. And at the same time, I feel sad for my father because he didn't experience it the way I did. He allowed his fear to get in the way. But I believe that whether he was aware of it or not, he did what they asked. He loved people deeply, and he was a very kind, generous, compassionate person who loved to make others happy. So an interesting side note that I don't think I've talked about before is while I was still in the hypnosis, as I was just coming out of it, I realized that my father was there in spirit form as I went through the hypnosis. I don't think I had asked him to join me, but he was there. And he apologized to me that day. He said, "I'm sorry, I didn't realize what an amazing experience that was. And I kept us from bonding over that over the years." And I just shook my head and said, "You have nothing to apologize for. It happened exactly as it was supposed to happen." And you'll see a little bit more of the reason why for that. Having heard my story, you might be asking yourself the same questions I've asked since I learned about it. Why me? And how did this happen? I believe the answer to both of these questions can be found in a topic favored by my friend mentioned at the top of this presentation, my friend Paul Eno. He was a big proponent of the multiverse theory. In Paul's book, Footsteps in the Attic, he describes the multiverse theory like this. Picture soap bubbles in a bathtub. The bubbles, each of which is a universe, are crowded together, sliding against one another, and passing through one another frequently, with contact and even interaction in unexpected places and times. Indeed, space-time seems to be full of ripples, holes, currents, cross rips, and eddies, rather like a river that we spend all eternity swimming in. Multiverse theory believes that time as we understand it doesn't exist, that all that ever was and ever can be exists all at once in multiple parallel universes, that it contains all outcomes, possibilities, and creatures, and that the universes are contiguous and sometimes even coexistent. You know, and this was, when I first heard him talk about it, I said, yes, there's something to this. To paraphrase from his book once more, Footsteps in the Attic, Paul believed that quantum mechanics and the multiverse theory points to the idea that our consciousness isn't inside us, that it's non-local or shared. Our consciousnesses and all consciousnesses sweep across space-time in immeasurable waves. And where these waves intersect, those are the people, places, and things that we know. Where they form bonds, those are the people, places, and things that we love, have loved, and will love in our lives. But where there is an aware connection between our consciousness and that of someone, whether human or non-human, from another part of the multiverse, those are what we know as paranormal encounters, whether that be a ghost, a UFO, a Bigfoot, or any other kind of encounter. Paul also believed, and I agree, that this could mean that we share our consciousnesses with everyone who ever was and ever will be everywhere in the multiverse. That's not too overwhelming, is it, to think that? But if you were here last year, you heard me talk about the consciousness of cells. In the 1980s, scientists started doing cell enucleating work, where the nucleus was removed from the cell. In the old theory, it was believed that the cell, that was supposedly the heart of the cell, that it would die if it was removed. Instead, they were surprised when the cells continued to live, thrive, and respond to their environment. So they had to come up with a new theory. In the new theory, they believe that the nucleus is a photocopier, storing templates and genetic material for cell replication, but that it cannot self-express. They found that the cell membrane, the outside layer of the cell, is involved in driving the nucleus DNA replication, and that the membrane is the consciousness of the cell. It interprets the stimulus from outside, whether outside is within our body or like skin cells, external stimuli. And then it translates it into an internal message, instruction or reaction. Do they all react the same? If they have their own consciousness, it seems reasonable to think that it's possible that different cells can have different responses or reactions. Have you ever felt like you're split in two, like there's two halves of you trying to make a decision and you don't know which way to go? Maybe that's different cells fighting with each other. So if consciousness is non-local, if it's shared with the multiverse, but it is also on a cellular level, then I have to ask, are we connected to each other and to everything around us on a quantum level, cell to cell, particle to particle? I believe yes, and it seems other cultures, especially indigenous cultures, have always known this. Nature demonstrates it, look at the bugs and birds that communicate with each other, trees. Scientists are now saying that trees talk to each other and help each other across species. There's awareness there, but also think about your pets. I'm sure many of you have dogs or cats or other pets that know when you're sick and they lay on you, or they know when you're upset and they come and comfort you. Could that be a connection on a deeper level than we currently understand? Is it so hard to believe that other beings in other worlds or universes have this awareness of a connection as well? What does this sound like to you? Does it sound like all of our particles are psychic? We are all born with intuition. Every single one of you in this room has intuition. It's all about learning how to pay attention to it. And our modern culture doesn't always encourage that. So some of us have learned to throw that aside and learn how to listen to it. But we all have the ability. It is innate within us, and it may be at a cellular level. I believe that is how my quantum ETs found us and how they knew that we were the right ones for the job. Our quantum connection told them that we are empaths, and their ability to exist without our time means that they could see our life's potential in ways that we cannot. I don't believe they made me an empath, but I do believe they set me up for my life purpose. As I was coming out of the hypnosis and I was absorbing everything, I was shown a metaphor. Inside of me was something like a stacked puzzle resembling vertebrae. And I watch as the pieces of the puzzle fall into place over the years. They're getting me to where I need to go, getting me to where I am now. I believe they helped shape my entire life, the good, the bad, the ugly, and the beautiful. As beings without human boundaries of bodies and linear time, they were able to set me up with the signs so I could remember bit by bit, and they put things in my path to help me on my quest to understanding the strange and unusual. I think they knew that I would be stubborn enough to remain empathetic and compassionate in a world that seems to be filled with more and more cruelty and anger all the time. I don't believe I'm alone in this either. I've participated in countless conversations about ETs, from support group discussions to group lectures to Q&As to just dinner conversations. And there's always a recurring theme, and that is that ETs come across as emotionless. This has never, ever resonated with me, but people believe that their lack of emotions make them superior to us. I could never understand, that never added up to me, probably because I am an intelligent, emotional human being. The beings that my father and I encountered were full of emotions, love, joy, peace, tenderness. However, there was no anger, no jealousy, and no fear. There was no cruelty among them, no deception, and no hate. This is because they operated on a purely intuitive level. They had individuality, but they had collective consciousness. And because of that, cruelty to one meant cruelty to all. Jealousy of one was jealousy of all, and this includes the self. Therefore, those negatives are pointless to them. They, as beings, are the epitome of empathy. I believe that is why my father and I encountered them. Because we are empaths. We are souls in human form with the innate ability to feel what other humans feel and to understand their behavior from their perspective. We can feel beyond these confining meat suits. And we can feel the essence of human life more easily than others. I believe they gave me the gift that day of my purpose to spread kindness through empathy. You guys recognize him? Love this guy. And that quote up there, a miracle is what seems impossible but happens anyway. That's just from the movie, and I just love that quote. It has really nothing to do with this. But for those of you who maybe don't know, he is a fictional character from the movie Men in Black 3. But as a fiction writer, I know that much of fiction has a firm basis in reality. And this character has always resonated with me. He sees all possibilities of all things at all times. And I believe he may be an empath. Either that or I'm actually from whatever planet he's from. Because even though it isn't as clear-cut as they present it in the movie, this is how I experience life. And I'm going to paraphrase Griffin. In the movie, he says, "It is always October, November, March, so many futures, and they are all real. We just don't know which one will coalesce in this moment until that moment happens. Until then, they're all happening. All possibilities, all moments, all versions of you and me." There is a saying in the spiritual community that I'm hearing more and more, and it is, "I am you and you are me." And like my quantum ETs have taught me, to harm one is to harm all. This is true for human beings. But we differ in that we contain a huge roadblock to understanding that. And that is our ego, which tells us that we are separate from each other. But if everything I've talked about here today is even partly true, then we are not separate. We are all connected, and we will continue to be connected across all universes at all times. And that is the end of my talk. I would like to point out my books are in the book room if you would like to come take a look at it. If you are an empath, I have information on my empath groups as well. I have an online version the first Tuesday of each month and an in-person version the second Tuesday. And now I guess we have probably plenty of time for questions. If anybody has any? I knew you would have something like that. Yes. Yes. There could be, however, I doubt it. Just knowing what I know of encounters over the years, those things seem to not exist when people go looking for them. I haven't looked, but that is, when I learn how to stay awake 24 hours a day so I can do all the things I want to do, that's on my list. But great question. Any other questions? Yes. Okay.
Curiosity Street, called Stephen Hawking's favorite place, and he visits the military as part of it.
Oh, okay.
Compliment what you were saying.
And this was on what?
It's online streaming.
Curiosity Stream. Okay. Thank you. Thank you for sharing that. I think I saw a hand. Yes. Okay. Mm-hmm. Okay. Mm-hmm. Okay. So Chris Bledsoe talks about similar stuff. Okay. Okay. Well noted. Thank you for sharing. Were there any questions? Yes, in the back. Yep.
The question I have is, how unique is your account of this particular species, and should we infer that the good experiences you have with these folks, that their motivations and the agendas of all of those species that they do this is the same type of positive consciousness that you experience with your witness?
I mean, I know from what I know, I haven't heard a lot of other people talk about this type of ET. I know I have a friend who has had a similar encounter with something that was a consciousness, not like a physical encounter like people report with grays and things. But where it is on a quantum level, I do wonder if they are more around us and more people are experiencing them on a smaller scale and maybe just not realizing it. There's a lot of orb reports. Maybe that is what they are seeing. There's a lot of possibilities and a lot of, the great thing about this field is that there are so many rabbit holes to go down with questions like this. Like there are so many things that we can research on this. It's okay, well, which one do I pick first? As far as the other races, I don't believe that there are necessarily any races out there that are out to harm us. I think, like with us, there are bad within the good and good within the bad. And I think there's a lot of misunderstanding as well. I think there's a lot of questions we need to ask when encountering any ET being that maybe seems less friendly. And I don't believe that they're non-emotional either at all. That I don't think any of them are non-emotional. I think they just maybe are more emotionally intelligent and manage it in a far different way than we do. Did that answer your questions? Okay. Yes, down here. My friend Rob, Inner Center Hypnosis. He's very good. I highly recommend him. He's local to this area. You can stop by my table if you want more information. I see tentative hand. Yeah, I definitely, like I said, I've been running an empath group for 10 years, and I have had people show up to this group saying, I'm here to learn about empathy. And I'm like, oh, that's not what we do. Empathy is a huge part of being an empath, because empathy is putting yourself in somebody else's shoes and experiencing life from their perspective, not yours. And as empaths, we are able to do that very, very easily, very instinctually almost a lot of times. But there's a lot more to being an empath than just having this amazing empathy ability, and it does come with a lot of negatives because, overstimulation is a thing. Like, you think about a baby who gets overstimulated very easily, that is unfortunately the life of an empath. Being in crowds, it can be hard. Thank God this event is such a positive thing, or it could be very draining for an empath. So there are definitely a lot of misunderstandings, like you said, about empathy and being an empath. And there's also misunderstanding for intuitives who can pick up on other people's emotions. That is clairsentience. But as an empath, we take that on and it affects us. We feel it in our body and we'll carry it for days until we can get rid of it. Whereas an intuitive who just, can, sit there and say, I know exactly how you're feeling in this moment, but I'm not going to carry it out of this room with me. Those are very different things. And so there's a lot of misconceptions out there. Yes.
Modes you can get either passive or active.
Yeah. Yep.
You're just letting what's in the room, you're picking up on the person. Or you can go with active empath and focus in on the person. Is that correct stuff?
That is a very good way to describe it, yeah. And there's times when, like, I need to be more passive. Like, I have a day job that is not doing all of this awesome stuff, so I kind of try not to be an empath. It's hard to, you can't turn it off, but you can.
Turning the game down.
Or you could just kind of let it all go until later on you have time to do something about it, if you need to.
Like if you switch on the light.
Kind of, yeah. Yeah, thank you. Yes, and then I see you back there. I'll get to you after. Go ahead. Mm-hmm. Yeah, having a connection to nature is one of the signs of an empath. Empaths, like, I drove by the most horrible roadkill this morning and was, oh God, it was like, it physically hurts me every time I drive by roadkill, and I'm connected to my cat. I go out in the woods and I talk to rocks and trees, that is definitely strong within empaths. I don't think it's exclusive to empaths, but yeah, it's definitely, the connection to nature is very, very strong. Yeah. All right, a young woman back there had a question. Yes.
You mentioned that you're able to like sense their emotions and like feel what they feel. How are you sure that you're able to sense what they're sensing? Like, is it like a thought or is it actually their emotions? Because a lot of people consider them to be a higher community. So how are you sure that these are their emotions?
That's a great question, and it's really, really hard to answer because when it's intuition, it took me a long time to trust that I was accurate in what I was sensing. It took a lot of time and training. And I think as an empath, I tend to go into the core of everything. Like, we all have this facade that we carry with us. I go right in the middle, which sometimes causes problems for me. But in intuitive work, it is very helpful because I do see the truth. Because when the truth is always in the heart space, so I focus on that. And everything has a heart space, whether it's a physical heart or not. And I've learned how to connect to that. And I trust. I trust my spiritual team that I work with, and I trust myself at this point. But it took a long time to get there. That's why it took me a while to ask my dad. He passed away in 1997, and it took me until probably 2018 to ask him about it. It's a long time. So it's time, patience, work. Yes. I've thought about it, and I haven't felt like it's the right time, if that makes any sense. I do think about them a lot, and I wonder, where are you? What are you doing? But I think that they left behind essences of themselves, and that's all I need for now. And if I need more, I'll be able to reach them. Yes. Oh, sure. Yep, that one? Okay. I do have flyers at my table too. Yeah. Mm-hmm. I sense energy everywhere I go. Driving down the road, I pick up on things. So yeah, walking into restaurants. Being an empath is an intuitive ability. That's something that a lot of people don't understand. Feeling the energy is communicating with us, and that's intuition. Yeah. Am I doing okay on time? Okay. I have no idea. I see somebody's pointing over here. Oh, sorry.
I'm relatively new to the whole phenomenon coming in such of events. So my limited exposures through like Zondo, David Rush, Greer, if you want to mention him. So for a relative sense, you've been in the industry for so long, would you compare, 20 years ago to be a lot less closer to disclosure than we are now, based on what is occurring out there, especially with things like the Tic Tac video and the new book and all those other things? Or is it just the same thing kind of moving forward?
Disclosure. I would like to think we're closer to disclosure. I personally am the person going, I don't care if anybody discloses anything because I know the truth. I know what's going on. But I would love to have the masses be more aware. And I would love for trusted officials, does that exist? I would love for trusted officials to come out with more information on this, because I do believe that they are here to be helpful. I don't think they're here to fix things for us. I think they're here to give us the tools that we need to fix things. And we're being kept from that right now, those of us who aren't here talking about it and doing the work that we do. I see a hand back there, and then I'll. Not being a scientist, I would have to say that would probably be part of it, that their structure, their makeup is so different from ours that yes, it would appear different and present differently from us. That would make a lot of sense. I saw a hand. Okay, awesome. That's why we bring him. Yes. I have tried it under fairly controlled circumstances with a medium I used to work with. I think I do it a lot in dreams without trying, like in the dream state. I would love to pursue it more if I had more time, because I think I could be good at it if I did it more. It's definitely one of those rabbit holes that I need more time in my day. I need to get rid of my day job while keeping the paycheck. I work with whatever I encounter. I work with ghosts, I work with elementals, multiverse stuff. You know, I brought up the multiverse that Paulino talks about, and I've had a lot of weird things that I can only attribute to universes intersecting. So I guess that's not a being to work with, but it's energy. So I encounter all levels of things, including things that I would consider the D word, the demonic, but those were not at all what is put out there on TV and in movies. But I don't want to get off on that. I think I saw another hand over here, and then I'll come to you. Did somebody over here have a question? I don't know what those are. Okay. Yes, you had a question? I do. I have one child. She is now an adult herself. She has had experiences. She saw a UFO one day. We were driving to the KRI Center, and she saw it as we were driving and didn't tell me until later. It's like, kid, what are you doing? Because I didn't see it. She saw it out her side of the car. But found out later on, after I had her draw it out for me, found out later on that there had been another sighting of that same craft in the area by somebody else. So that was pretty cool. But she keeps a good distance from this stuff. She lets mom kind of do most of the heavy lifting. If she's seen anything else, she doesn't tell me. She's an empath. She definitely is. Yeah. She can read people really, really well. Just a warning to everybody. I saw a hand back there, and then I'll come to you. Yes.
And stories of women being impregnated and then having their fetus disappear. Mysterious circumstances that relates to the agenda.
That's a great question. As far as cattle mutilations, I'm not really sure. I don't know if I can fully buy into it being ET related. But I know there's incidents of these things appearing on the tops of trees and light poles and just in really weird places, as well as being mutilated. So I don't know. I haven't thought a whole lot about that. The human experimentation that you referred to, pregnancies and that sort of thing, you know, I've used the analogy before, and this may seem a little insensitive, but like, you know, I do fish occasionally. I go out and I do some fly fishing once in a while. And I think about, pulling that poor fish out of the water. We're pulling him out of, his world. And this crazy, huge being is looking at him and pulling the hook out of his mouth and then throwing him back in the water. And what is he going back and telling his friends? Like, holy moly, you wouldn't believe what just happened to me. I saw an alien. I don't know that there is ill intent with those things. I don't know that. I know people that have had stuff done to them, they believe, by ETs, but later on say, it was scary at the time, but looking back, I know they weren't trying to hurt me. I think there's a purpose there. I just don't know what it is. We'll go here, and then I think we're probably out of time. Getting there? Yes? Mm-hmm. Yep. Yeah, again, I need 24 hours of awake time in my day to research all of the stuff I want to research. Mm-hmm. Yeah. Yes, I think you'll be my last question there. Phyllis, I know you. You can, no, the woman behind you, Phyllis, I was saying you can come talk to me afterwards. Mm-hmm. I do consider I label myself an empathic medium because it's just easier for people to understand what I do. The medium I trained with, she saw ghosts. Like Uncle Joe would be standing next to her wearing his, hat and smoking his pipe, and she could describe him like that. I feel things, but I do feel energies the way a medium does. It's very similar. And doing my empath group, I've met other empaths who do see Uncle Joe standing right there. It's not, I do get visuals, but not as often as some mediums do. Does that help? All right, I see Peter standing in the wings, so I will be at my table all day. If you have questions, please stop by. Thank you for being a lovely audience. You guys are awesome. You hung in there. It's already getting warm in here.